everyone, and welcome to this week's video. This week, as heavily requested, definitely it's time for some Mushroom Hunters videos. It has been quite a while since I have drawn these three, which is Freya, Cap and Gus, and the Mushroom Hunters are a series of characters that exist in my Plant Witch universe. I have a series of characters which I've built a universe around and I am building stories around. These particular characters, you have the elfin girl named Freya and the two little critters named Cap and Gus. I'm going to give the full list of equipment here now. If you ever miss any, just look in the description box down below. It'll all be listed there. For the line work, I actually am practicing digital art again, so I'm trying to get into the funk of it again. Since this is also a colouring page in my new colouring book, Enchanted Forests, I really wanted to practice doing some digital line work, so I'm using my iPad Pro here, which is a 9.7 inch first generation with the Apple Pen first generation as well. I print it on some mixed media paper, which is very similar paper that is also going to be used in the colouring book as well. Use alcohol markers, which are my Promarker range, some Polychromos with Prismacolours. I also use some acrylic pens as well, and a little bit of white gel pen. As always, the full list of equipment is listed down below. There's some very light washes of watercolour on here as well to give texture. So, why haven't I drawn a Mushroom Hunters piece for a while? There is a few factors that go into making one of these pieces, and one of the factors is the Mushroom Hunters pieces take quite a bit of planning. I always get asked about backgrounds and background elements, and typically a average piece like this from start to finish, from the planning stages to the finalized product, can take nearly a week sometimes to go from start to finish. And sometimes when it comes to filming content for videos, I don't have that long to film a video, so I end up doing something that is either a little bit more simpler or whatever takes my fancy on that day. It just can be that sometimes that these pieces can be a little bit more complicated than others just because they have heavy backgrounds, but that is not an excuse. I love drawing the Mushroom Hunters because it gives me an excuse to draw lots of natural backgrounds, do a lot of research, and a lot of research does go into these pieces. I look into framing the piece, how the framing is going to be, what sort of mushrooms are they going to be finding, what colours am I going for. I'm going for a very summer vibe with this one. Imagine like it's a really warm walk in the woods, and Freya is cataloguing her mushrooms because she catalogues every single one and writes down what medicinal purposes, whether or not they're worth taking, whether or not they're worth not taking. Freya does a lot of research when it comes to mushrooms because certain people, when they come to her for particular goods, they ask, hey, do you know where this and this is? So she writes down in particular like locations of where certain things are. It's just, it's one of those, she has a little book and she walks around, and it just made sense to me that she has this little book. I'd love to do like a physical like release of the Mushroom Hunter's Guide to Mushrooms, where it's all like handwritten with her notes. I just think that'd be really, really cute. But Freya is a really interesting character to draw because she has a very interesting colour palette. And what I mean by this, like Marie, Freya uses a lot of earth tones. A lot of browns and simple dyed cloves are within her clothing. She doesn't have a very rich, let's say, colour palette. This is very opposite to a character like Lavender, who has purples and very rich looking clothing. Freya has to move around a lot, so it's almost with her clothing I have to think about, is she able to move in this, is she able to run around? And Freya is quite tall and skinny, whereas like Marie's very short, so they have very similar colour palettes but they look fairly different in a way, and I love drawing them all, and I always seem to put off drawing the bigger pieces just because it takes a lot of time and a lot of planning. And that's just simply what it came down to. Sometimes other projects just kind of popped up and I just didn't end up drawing as much Mushroom Hunters as I would like to. It's the same with Marie and Prickles. I haven't really drawn a big piece with them for a while, and I'm making my aim now to draw at least one big piece a month. I want one big piece with one big background at least a month. I'm going to take the time to do this, and like I said, sometimes these projects can be slightly difficult. It's all a balancing act when it comes to illustration, and we have to make sure that we take our time as an illustrator to make sure we put enough time into a project. Now, working as a full-time illustrator, everything is a balancing act. It's all balancing that fine line between work and play, so to speak. I love drawing. Drawing is something I am very, very passionate about, and I draw to relax. I draw to chill. Drawing is something that I have always enjoyed doing, but then there becomes that line of like, okay, when you have to stop. So with me, I have to plan out exactly what I do each day. So when it comes to making content, for example, I have to put aside half of my week to make videos, and that's not including client work, that's not including making sure that the story's up to date, or working on Patreon, or working on commissions. That doesn't include that. That's just making content for the channel, and it can be quite a difficult balancing act. And this is why I say to a lot of people, like, don't feel the pressure to produce something every single day. It's why I see a lot of artists end up streaming instead of producing content. It's a sort of burnout that you can feel from overwhelming and oversaturating yourself doing too much. And yet again, this goes down to the balancing act. Making sure that you have content for everything, but it's content that you're happy with. I really wanted to draw Mushroom Hunters this week. I felt it again. I felt that fire to draw an overly complicated background piece with lots of different elements. And do you know what? I really enjoyed myself drawing this. I spent about 2-3 days working on this, from the line work, from planning to line work to the finished product. Now, since this is going to be a colouring page in the colouring book, there's a few tweaks I need to do to the line work just to make it a little bit cleaner, because as I was colouring it in, I noticed, like, okay, this needs to be more predominant so that people understand what goes which way and where, mainly because when I'm doing line work, it doesn't always end up being like the finalized product. I build on top of the line work. The line work for me is just a frame base to work on, and I've got to understand that not everyone works that way, and it's the same with everything you do. So I am going to do a proper video talking in depth about doing colouring books and doing that sort of like, you have to think about the consumer and not just what you like to do, because there's a lot of factors that play into that, and a lot of fun things that play into that as well. I mean, doing some of my favourite techniques here. I haven't done this in a while, where I kind of just use all mediums in one piece. It's the same where I love doing graphic marker or alcohol marker as your base layer, because that builds a really beautiful bright colour, and you can build on top of that beautiful bright colour and make texture. It's a fantastic technique. I've talked about it in a few videos. You basically put your flat layer down with your alcohol markers and then build your texture up on top using watercolours and coloured pencils. It's a fantastic technique. I highly recommend it to anyone. It saves your markers, it makes your markers last way longer, and on top of that, you get really beautiful effects that you would not normally get from marker alone. This is a technique that I particularly enjoy doing, and I can touch on it again in a video if you want me to go really more in depth and show you how I really produce that effect overall. But I have talked about it in a few videos. I think there is a video up on the channel somewhere, but it might be a little bit outdated now. But I want to ask you guys, because this is something that's really important to me. I always want feedback. I always want to know more. I am very interested in hearing what you would like me to do, what content you would like to see in the future. So now that we've probably thinking about doing one massive piece a month, which means that you guys are going to get to see one massive piece a month up on this channel. We're going to do big mushroom hunters, plant witch, we're going to be doing a dragon keeper, and we're going to be doing poison witch as well as mixing in a few pieces here and there to make it a little bit more fun. It's always interesting to get feedback. Now, I know I have not done a challenge video in quite a while. So what I would really like to do is I would like a palette challenge chosen by you, the viewers. I would like to know what colour combination you would like to see together in a video, right? And maybe we'll produce a beautiful piece of art from it. Well, maybe not beautiful, but you know, whatever you guys can choose specific colourways. So say you want blue, green and purple, or orange, pink and green. Like, let me know in the comment section down below. I really love palette challenges because I think it restricts our colorways. I am in my comfort zone with certain colorways. I really love earth tones, and I really love color combinations of like pink, blue and purple. I love those color combinations, and I tend to find myself straying away from certain color variations. Red, orange and yellows are probably the colours that I steer quite away from a lot, and if I do use reds, I tend to use a lot of browns with it to create like an autumnal palette. So it'd be really interesting to try a palette that you suggest, and we'll make a video, and of course the person's whose suggestion that I will choose will be in the video as well, obviously asking your permission, of course. I really want to do more interactive things with you as the audience, because a lot of my content is just me drawing and colouring, and that is the truth, and I understand that. I am always hesitant about giving tutorials, and we talked about this in a stream. I'm hesitant about giving tutorials because there isn't just one way of doing things. There is hundreds of ways of how artists will approach the same subject. But when it comes to actually drawing figures, I will say this to anyone: you've got to learn the rules before you break the rules. You have to understand certain things before you can break them. If you ever want to do studying specifically with bodies, because I do it all the time in my sketchbooks, I think it's heavily important to do studies. Places like Pose Maniacs, Senshi Stock are sites that I heavily use when I need to reference something. They are fantastic resource-free websites, and some of them even have donation things if you want to support them as well. I think as artists we should always strive to improve ourselves. Every time you draw, you do improve, whether or not you believe it. Sometimes we take a few steps forward and a few steps back. For example, with this piece, I feel like Freya's pose is a little bit too stiff. I think everything else in the picture has movement, but she to me looks a little bit too stiff, and there is ways that I would change that. Maybe I should have had her arch her back a little bit more, just to make it look like that bag is really heavy. It needs to have some form of movement, because I always feel that when you are drawing, you should be making it feel like it is a still from a movement. And this is something that was taught to me when I was at university. Your character always wants to feel like it's moving, and it always feels like it's flowing. So here's a few final looks at my finalized illustration. I really like this. There's a few mistakes here and there, but hey, we all make mistakes. We are not perfect. If you think an illustration that you've done is perfect, no, it's best to analyze instead of self-doubt yourself. Analyze what you've done and see how you can improve. That's a really, really important skill that you do end up developing over years. But now let's have a look at some of your wonderful art. If you want your art featured in one of these videos, make sure to tag me or use the hashtag StayCreativeWithSophiralou on Instagram, Twitter, or even show it off on the Discord. I love featuring your art. I think you are all so talented, and it's wonderful to see what creativity you come out with. I really hope you have enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you're happy for the return of the Mushroom Hunters. Have a wonderful day, folks, and as always, stay creative.